Have you ever watched the sunset and wondered if your spark's still burning bright? Hello. My dear friends, it's Eva, your 65-year-old storyteller from Eufaula, Alabama, where the Chattahoochee hums lullabies under the stars. I'm feeling mighty blessed today, and I hope y'all are holding up, hearts warm and souls strong. Tonight, I'm slipping into the heart of Marianne Caldwell, a woman whose courage mirrors your own, and I'll be her voice, pouring out her story just for you, my sisters who've loved fiercely, sacrificed quietly, and risen time and again. If her journey touches you, give that subscribe button a tap. It keeps our circle tight. So, cozy up with your tea or that worn blanket you cherish. And let me, as Marianne, share a tale of heartbreak, healing, and finding light in the darkest storms, right here, together. The chandeliers in Harrington Gallery cast a warm, golden glow, like fireflies caught in a summer jar. I stood in the center of the room, my heart thumping, not from fear, but from a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. At 62, in a deep emerald dress that hugged my frame just right, I was no longer the woman who faded into the background. My silver-streaked auburn hair caught the light, and for the first time in decades, I felt seen. The walls around me were adorned with my botanical illustrations, wildflowers and seagrasses from the Oregon coast, each stroke of my brush a whisper from a life I'd almost forgotten. Tonight wasn't just an art exhibit, it was a declaration. Dr. Eleanor Voss, director of the Harborview Maritime Museum, stood beside me, her voice carrying over the hum of the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, raising a glass of champagne, "we're honored to announce a groundbreaking collaboration with one of Harborview's finest artists, Marianne Caldwell. Her work will pair with Captain Winthrop's historic coastal charts, creating a dialogue between past and present, science and art." The room erupted in applause. Glasses clinking, voices murmuring approval. I smiled, my hand steady despite the weight of the moment. Across the gallery, I saw faces I recognized, local collectors, professors from Astoria University, even the barista from the corner coffee shop who always slipped an extra biscotti into my bag. But then my eyes caught something else, a ripple of tension near the entrance. Claire Hammond, my daughter-in-law, stood there, her blonde hair pulled tight in a sleek bun, her navy dress tailored to perfection. Beside her was her husband, Colin Pierce, his suit slightly rumpled, his jaw set in that way I'd come to recognize as trouble. Claire's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the room seemed to shrink, the chatter fading into a distant hum. I knew why they were here. They weren't here to celebrate me. They were here to tear me down. Dr. Voss leaned in, her voice low. "Marianne, you ready for this? Looks like your family decided to make an appearance." I nodded, my smile unwavering. "Let them come. Eleanor, I'm not hiding anymore. It hadn't always been like this. Just 3 weeks ago, I was sitting in my kitchen in Harborview, the salt tang of the Pacific drifting through the open window. My old Victorian house, with its creaky floors and stained glass windows, was my sanctuary, built with the money I'd earned illustrating wildflowers for field guides. I'd raised my son, James, there, watched him grow from a boy who collected seashells to a man who married a woman I barely recognized. Claire had moved in 6 months ago, claiming they needed a fresh start after Colin's investment firm collapsed. I welcomed them, thinking it was temporary. But I was wrong. The morning I found the letter from the Oregon Lottery Commission changed everything. I'd bought the ticket on a whim. A little birthday treat to myself, tucked it into my purse, and forgotten about it. When I opened the envelope, my hand shook. $12 million. After taxes, it would be close to $8 million. I couldn't breathe. This was the answer to every worry that had kept me awake: property tax, the leaky roof, The way Claire's eyes lingered on my antique furniture like she was already redecorating. I didn't tell them, not yet. I wanted to surprise James with a family dinner, maybe even agree to the renovations Claire kept pushing for. But that same morning, Claire cornered me at the front door, her voice sharp. "Marianne, we need to talk. Colin and I think it's time for some changes around here." Change it, that's what she called it. They wanted me to move to Coastal Haven, a retirement community with manicured lawns and bingo nights. "It's for your own good," Colin said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "This house is too much for you to handle alone." I clutched my purse, the lottery letter burning against my palm. I could have told them right then. Ended the conversation with a single sentence. But something stopped me, a cold realization that they'd been planning this for months. Long before they knew about any money. My home, my life, was just a stepping stone for their ambitions. Back in the gallery, Claire weaved through the crowd, Colin trailing behind. Her heels clicked against the polished hardwood, each step deliberate. I turned to Dr. Voss, who was explaining the exhibit layout to a museum patron, and excused myself. "I'll be right back. Eleanor, just need to handle something." Claire reached me first, her smile as brittle as thin ice. "Marianne," she said, loud enough for nearby guests to turn. "What a surprise finding you here. I didn't know you were into all this." She gestured vaguely at the paintings, her tone dripping with condescension. I took a sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles steady me. "Is it a surprise, Claire? Or is that why you came?" Colin stepped forward, his voice smooth but edged with irritation. "We heard about the event and thought we'd show our support. Family sticks together." Right. The hypocrisy stung, but I kept my composure. "How thoughtful," I said, though I don't recall getting a call or text from either of you since I left the house. Claire's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "We didn't know where you were. Marianne, you just vanished. James has been worried sick. James, my son's name hit like a wave, stirring a familiar ache. I hadn't seen him in weeks, not since I packed 2 suitcases and checked into the Seaside Grand Hotel. I'd left a note for him, explaining I needed space, but he hadn't reached out. I wondered if Claire had even shown it to him. Has he? I said mildly, "Funny. My phone's been quiet. But you found me now, Claire, when it suits you." Dr. Voss appeared at my side, her presence a quiet anchor. "Everything all right?" Marianne, she asked, her eyes flicking to Claire and Colin. "Perfect," I said, my voice steady. "Claire, Colin, this is Dr. Eleanor Voss, director of the Maritime Museum. She's the one who invited me to collaborate on this exhibit." Claire's eyes narrowed, but she extended a hand. "Charmed," she said, her voice tight. "I'm Marianne's daughter-in-law. We're just surprised by all this sudden activity. Marianne's been rather unpredictable lately." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Unpredictable. I knew what she was doing, planting seeds of doubt, painting me as unstable to justify their plans. I'd heard the rumors she'd spread, whispers that I was losing it, that I needed help. Dr. Voss raised an eyebrow, unfazed. On the contrary, Marianne's been remarkably focused. Her illustrations are the heart of this exhibit. Did you know her work is in the permanent collections of several natural history museums? Claire blinked, caught off guard. "I wasn't aware," she said, her voice faltering. I seized the moment, turning to the nearest display, a framed watercolor of dune grass, its delicate blade swaying against a stormy sky. "This one," I said, loud enough for the small crowd gathering around us, was inspired by the beaches here in Harborview. Captain Winthrop documented these same plants 2 centuries ago. Our exhibit will show how the coast has changed, how nature adapts. It's a conversation across time. The guests murmured, nodding, drawn in by the passion in my voice. Claire's face tightened, her plan unraveling. Colin leaned in, his voice low. Marianne, this isn't the place for family discussions. Maybe we should step outside. I'm quite comfortable here, I said, meeting his gaze. In fact, I was just about to show Dr. Voss the Winthrop charts I acquired. Would you like to join us? Claire's eyes flashed with anger, but she couldn't afford to make a scene, not with half of Harborview's cultural elite watching. You're embarrassing yourself, she hissed, stepping closer, pretending you belong here, in that dress, at your age. Where did you even get the money for all this? The question was a trap, but I didn't take the bait. My finances aren't your concern. Claire, I said calmly, but if you're curious about the charts, I bought them at auction for $100,000. They're an investment, and they'll be displayed at the museum. Hardly frivolous. Wouldn't you say? A woman nearby, a professor from Astoria University, chimed in. 100,000. That's a steal for Winthrop's work. Marianne, your eye for detail is impeccable. Claire's face flushed, her composure cracking. Colin touched her arm, murmuring, Let's go. Claire, this isn't worth it. But Claire wasn't done. She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. You think you can just reinvent yourself? Marianne Play, the celebrated artist, James deserves better than a mother who abandons her family for some midlife crisis. The words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. I thought of James, his shy smile, the way he'd run to me with seashells as a boy. I thought of the years I'd spent putting his needs above mine, working double shifts at the library to pay for his soccer camp, his college tuition. I thought of the lottery ticket, the secret I'd kept to protect myself from the very people who should have loved me. Claire, I said, my voice soft but firm. I didn't abandon anyone. I'm standing up for myself, something I should have done years ago. If James wants to talk, he knows where to find me. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her tone polite but final. Ms. Hammond, perhaps you'd like to enjoy the exhibit. Marianne's work is quite remarkable. Or I can have someone escort you out. Claire froze, realizing she'd lost the room. She turned on her heel, Colin following, their footsteps echoing as they retreated. The crowd parted for them, then closed again. Conversations resuming as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. I moved to the display of Winthrop's charts, their faded ink tracing the Oregon coast in meticulous detail. They were more than artifacts. They were a bridge to the artist I'd once been, the one who'd sketched wildflowers by moonlight. Dr. Voss joined me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. You handled that beautifully, she said. Not everyone could stay so composed. I've had practice, I said, managing a small smile. But thank you, Eleanor, for everything. She nodded, gesturing to the charts. These are going to be the centerpiece of our exhibit. Your illustrations will bring them to life. I can't wait to see what you create next. As we talked, I felt a warmth spreading through me, a sense of belonging I hadn't known in years. The gallery was alive with possibility, new connections, new projects, a new chapter. But beneath it all was a quiet ache. James, my boy, caught between his mother and his wife. I wondered if he'd seen the article in the Harborview Herald, the one calling me a local treasure. I wondered if he'd ever look at me the way these strangers did, with respect instead of obligation. I remembered the moment I'd decided to fight back. It was the day Claire suggested Coastal Haven, her voice syrupy with false concern. I'd gone to the Seaside Grand Hotel, checked into a suite overlooking the harbor, and called Valencia Torres, my lawyer. They're trying to push me out. I told her, I need to protect myself. Valencia had been blunt. Marianne, you've got $8 million now. They'll come for it unless you act fast. So I did. I set up a trust, moved my money to secure accounts, and started planning a life that was mine. The Winthrop charts, the North Cove cottage, this exhibit, they weren't just purchases or projects. They were proof that I was still here, still capable, still worthy. The reception wound down, guests drifting out into the foggy Harbour View night. I lingered by a window, watching the lighthouse beams sweep across the harbour. It was steady, unyielding, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, there was a way home. Dr. Voss approached, holding 2 glasses of chamomile tea, a nod to my love for herbal brews. "You did good tonight, Marianne," she said, handing me one. "This is just the beginning." I took the tea, its warmth seeping into my hands. "I hope so," I said. "But I can't help wondering about James, if he'll ever understand." She studied me, her eyes kind but knowing. "Give him time. He's your son. He'll find his way back." I nodded, though the ache remained. As I sipped my tea, I thought of the North Cove cottage, its studio waiting for my paints, its garden blooming with wildflowers. I thought of the life I was building, not just for me, but for the woman I'd always been beneath the sacrifices. If Marianne's story resonates with you, we'd love for you to join us on this journey. Hit that subscribe button to follow her path from heartbreak to triumph and discover more stories of courage and renewal. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself like Marianne did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're all ears. And your story might inspire someone else out there. Stay tuned for what's next, because Marianne's fight is far from over. The fog rolled in thick that morning, blanketing Harbour View in a soft, grey hush. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one I'd bought at a thrift store in '83, its oak surface scarred from years of spilled juice and hurried dinners. The house smelled of cedar and salt, the Pacific just a block away, its waves a steady heartbeat I'd known my whole life. In my hands was a letter from the Oregon Lottery Commission, its words still unreal. "Congratulations. Marianne Caldwell. You've won $12 million. I read it again, my fingers tracing the numbers, as if they might vanish. I was 62, a widow who'd spent decades pinching pennies, and now I held a fortune. But instead of joy, I felt a quiet dread. My daughter-in-law, Claire, and her husband, Colin, were upstairs. Their voices muffled but sharp, planning something I wasn't meant to hear. I tucked the letter into my cardigan pocket, its weight a secret I wasn't ready to share. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening in my own home. Back in the '80s, this house was my refuge. I'd bought it with the money from illustrating wildflowers of the Pacific coast. A field guide that still sat on library shelves from Astoria to Eureka. It wasn't much a creaky Victorian with peeling paint and a temperamental furnace, but it was mine. I'd moved here after my husband, Tom, died in a fishing accident, leaving me and our 3-year-old son, James, with nothing but a small life insurance payout and a mountain of grief. James was my light in those dark years. He'd toddle into my makeshift studio, a corner of the living room with a wobbly easel, and watch me paint June grass or sea lavender. "Pretty, Mama," he'd say. His chubby fingers smudging the edges of my sketches. I'd laugh, scoop him up, and tell him stories about the plants, how they clung to cliffs, how they survived storms. I worked nights at the Harbour View Library, shelving books and balancing budgets, so I could be home for him during the day. My dreams of museum exhibits and art grants faded, replaced by soccer practices and parent-teacher conferences. I didn't mind. James was worth it. By the time he was grown, I'd traded my paintbrushes for a teaching gig at the community center, showing retirees how to sketch wildflowers. James went to college in Portland, met Claire, and married her in a lavish ceremony I could barely afford. Claire was charming at first, all bright smiles and polite questions about my little drawings. but I saw the way her eyes lingered on my house, its high ceilings and bay windows, like she was measuring it for her own plans. 6 months ago, they showed up at my doorstep, bags in hand. Colin's investment firm had tanked, leaving them drowning in debt. Just for a bit. "Mom," James said, his eyes tired. "We need to get back on our feet." I opened my door, thinking it was a chance to be close to my son again, but Claire had other ideas. The kitchen clock ticked, pulling me back to the present. I sipped my chamomile tea, its warmth doing little to ease the chill in my bones. Upstairs, Claire's heels clicked across the hardwood, a sound I'd come to dread. She appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair pulled back, her blouse crisp despite the early hour. "Marianne," she said, her voice too bright. "We need to talk." I set my mug down, bracing myself. About what? Claire. She slid into the chair across from me, folding her hands like a schoolteacher about to scold a child. "Colin and I have been discussing the house. It's a lot for you to manage alone. The stairs, the yard, the taxes. We think it's time for a change." My stomach twisted, but I kept my face neutral. "This is my home, Claire. I've managed it for 35 years. She sighed, a practiced sound of pity. "I know, but let's be realistic. You're not getting any younger. Coastal Haven has lovely apartments, activities, people your age. You'd be so much happier there." I stared at her, the letter in my pocket suddenly heavy. Coastal Haven wasn't about my happiness. It was about clearing me out so they could take over. "And what happens to the house?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. Claire's smile didn't waver. "We'd take care of it. James grew up here. After all, it's his legacy. We could update it, make it a proper family home again." Legacy. The word stung. This house was my legacy, paid for with late nights and calloused hands. I'd painted every room, planted every rose in the garden, fixed every leak with my own tools. And now they wanted to erase me from it. Before I could respond, Colin appeared, coffee mug in hand, his tie loose like he'd slept in it. "Marianne," he said, using my first name in that way I hated. "We're just trying to help. You've been so generous letting us stay, but 3 generations under one roof. It's complicated." I clutched the edge of the table, my knuckles whitening. Complicated for who? "Colin, you've turned my studio into your office, rearranged my kitchen, parked your cars in my driveway. If it's so complicated, you're welcome to find somewhere else." Claire's eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed sweet. "That's not fair. We're thinking of you. The stove was left on twice last month. You misplaced your glasses. We're worried." I wanted to laugh. The stove incidents were because Claire kept moving my pots, throwing off my routines. My glasses, I'd found them in a drawer she'd organized. But I saw the game they were playing, building a case that I was slipping, that I couldn't be trusted. "I'm fine," I said, standing, "and this conversation is over." Claire exchanged a glance with Colin, a silent signal I didn't miss. "We've already looked into Coastal Haven," she said, her tone maddeningly reasonable. "They have an opening next week. We can help you pack." The air left my lungs. Next week. They weren't just suggesting, they were planning. I turned away, needing space, and grabbed my coat. "I'm going out," I said, my voice tight. "Marianne, we're not done," Colin called, but I was already at the door. The fog outside was cool against my face, a balm for the fire in my chest. As I walked toward the harbor, the letter in my pocket felt like a lifeline. I didn't know what I'd do with $12 million, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let Claire and Colin take my home or my life. I remembered the first time Claire came to the house, just after she and James got engaged. She'd walked through the rooms, her heels clicking, her eyes appraising. "It's charming," she'd said, but her smile was tight, like she was picturing new wallpaper, new furniture, a new owner, I'd offered her tea, showed her my sketches, hoping to connect. She'd nodded politely, then changed the subject to her job at Westview Academy, how she needed to maintain appearances as admissions director. James was different back then. He'd hug me, ask about my day, even flip through my old field guides. "You should paint again." "Mom," he'd say, his voice earnest. But Claire's influence grew, and soon he was echoing her talking about modernizing the house, streamlining my life. I wanted to believe he didn't see how she was pushing me out, but deep down, I knew he was choosing her over me. The worst was my studio. It was a small room off the back porch, its north-facing windows perfect for painting. I'd spent years there, sketching sea oats and lupines, losing myself in the rhythm of brushstrokes. When Claire and Colin moved in, Colin claimed it as his office, piling my canvases in the attic. "I need the space for calls," he'd said, not even looking at me. Claire had shrugged. "It's just a hobby." "Marianne, you don't need all that clutter." Clutter, my life's work, reduced to a word. I'd swallowed my hurt, telling myself it was temporary. But temporary had stretched into months, and now they were talking about Coastal Haven like it was a done deal. I stopped at the harbour, the lighthouse looming in the distance, its beam cutting through the fog. Fishermen hauled crates of crab, their voices carrying over the water. I leaned against a weathered bench, pulling the lottery letter from my pocket. 8 million after taxes, enough to fix the roof, pay the taxes, maybe even travel to the botanical gardens in Seattle I'd always wanted to see. Enough to start over. But Claire's words echoed Coastal Haven. Happier, legacy. I thought of James, his silence these past weeks, the way he'd look away when Claire spoke for him. I loved him, but I couldn't keep living for him, not if it meant losing myself. I folded the letter, my resolve hardening. I'd go to the lottery office in Salem, claim the money, and figure out my next move. But first, I needed to know what Claire and Colin were really after. I walked back to the house, the fog lifting as the sun broke through. Inside, the kitchen was empty, but I heard them in the living room, their voices low. "If she agrees to Coastal Haven, we can list the house by spring," Claire was saying. "Westview's board will eat it up, a historic home, fully renovated, it's perfect for entertaining." Colin grunted. "And if she doesn't agree?" A pause. Then Claire, her voice cold. "We'll make her see it's the best option. She's already forgetting things. No one will question it." My blood ran cold. They weren't just planning to take my house. They were planning to take my dignity, my independence. I slipped out before they noticed me, my hand shaking as I dialed Valencia Torres, my old friend and lawyer. "Valencia," I said when she answered, "I need your help. They're trying to push me out of my home." Her voice was calm, professional. "Come to my office tomorrow. Marianne, bring everything you've got. We'll figure this out." That night, I lay in bed, the house creaking around me like an old friend. I thought of the years I'd spent here, the laughter, the tears, the quiet moments when it was just me and James. I thought of the wildflowers I'd painted, each one a piece of my soul. Claire could take my studio, rearrange my kitchen, even spread lies about my mind. But she couldn't take that. I pulled out my sketchbook, untouched for months, and drew a single sea lavender, its purple blooms delicate against the page. It was a small act, but it felt like defiance. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. As I drifted to sleep, the lighthouse beam swept through my window, steady and sure. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew one thing: I was ready to fight for myself, for my home, for the woman I'd always been beneath the sacrifices. The morning sun broke through the fog, casting dappled light across Harborview's cobblestone streets. I walked toward Valencia Torres's law office, my boots crunching against the damp pavement. The lottery letter tucked safely in my purse. The air smelled of salt and pine, a reminder of the wild Oregon coast that had always grounded me. Yesterday's conversation with Claire and Colin still echoed in my mind their cold certainty that I belonged in Coastal Haven, that my home was theirs to claim. But today wasn't about them. Today was about taking back my life. I'd spent the night sketching sea lavender, each stroke a quiet vow to fight. The $12 million, 8 after taxes, was more than money. It was power, a chance to rewrite the story they'd scripted for me. But I had to be careful. Claire's words about my forgetfulness weren't just cruel, they were strategic, a way to undermine me. I needed Valencia's help to protect myself, to build a future where I could paint, live, and be free. Valencia's office was in a converted craftsman bungalow, its porch lined with ferns that swayed in the breeze. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee and old books welcomed me, a stark contrast to the tension of my house. Valencia, a wiry woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense bob and a warm laugh, greeted me with a hug. "Marianne, you look like you haven't slept since Reagan was in office," she said, ushering me to a leather chair. "What's going on?" I poured out everything the lottery win. Claire and Colin's plan to push me into assisted living, their takeover of my home. I told her about the stove incidents, the misplaced glasses, the way they'd turned my studio into Colin's office. "They're building a case, Val," I said, my voice shaking. "They're saying I'm not capable, that I need to be managed." Valencia's eyes narrowed, her pen tapping the desk. "This isn't just about the house, is it?" "They know about the money and not yet," I said, pulling the letter from my purse. "I haven't told anyone, but they're acting like they own me, like my life's just an inconvenience." She scanned the letter, her expression shifting from concern to determination. 12 million's a game changer. "Marianne, if Claire and Colin get wind of this, they'll come at you with everything they've got. We need to lock this down now." How I asked, my hands twisting in my lap. "I don't want a war, Val. I just want my home, my life." She leaned forward, her voice steady. "First, we set up a trust to protect your winnings. That keeps the money out of their reach, even if they try something shady. Second, we document everything, every conversation, every incident they're using to paint you as incompetent. And third, you need to think about your next move. This house situation isn't sustainable." I nodded, the weight of her words settling over me. "What about the house? It's in my name, but they're living there. Can they take it?" "Not legally," Valencia said, jotting notes. "You own it outright, and your husband's will left everything to you. But they could claim tenant rights since they've been there 6 months. We'd need to serve a formal eviction notice, which could take 60 days under Oregon law. If they fight it, it gets messy. 60 days. The thought of sharing my home with them that long made my skin crawl. But Valencia's plan gave me something I hadn't felt in months' control. "Let's do it," I said. "The trust, the documentation, all of it." She smiled, a glint in her eye. "That's the Marianne I know. Let's get to work. By noon." Valencia had drafted the trust paperwork and scheduled an appointment with a financial advisor recommended by the lottery office. I left her office with a plan and a flicker of hope, but also a new fear. What if Claire and Colin escalated before I was ready? I stopped at the harbor, watching fishing boats bob against the docks, their nets tangled like my thoughts. The lighthouse stood tall in the distance, its beam a faint pulse in the daylight. I pulled out my sketchbook, drawing its silhouette, letting the rhythm of pencil on paper steady me. That's when my phone buzzed, a text from Thaddeus Quinn, a local realtor I'd met years ago at a community art show. "Marianne, heard you might be looking for a change. Got a property you'd love, North Cove Cottage, by the lighthouse. Private showing tomorrow. I stared at the message, surprised. I hadn't told anyone I was considering moving, but the idea of a fresh start tugged at me. My house was my heart, but it was also a battleground. Maybe a new place, a space just for me, could be part of my plan. I texted back, tomorrow works, 10 a.m. 10. The next morning, I drove to North Cove, a secluded stretch of coast where the lighthouse stood sentinel. The fog had lifted, revealing cliffs dotted with wildflowers and waves crashing against rocky shores. Thaddeus was waiting in the driveway of North Cove Cottage, a stone house with a modern glass wing that seemed to float above the sea. He waved, his silver hair catching the light, his smile genuine. "Marianne, welcome," he said. "This place is special. I had a feeling it'd speak to you." The cottage was breathtaking. Stone walls met polished wood floors, and the glass wing opened to panoramic views of the Pacific. But it was the studio that stole my breath, a separate building carved into the cliff, its north-facing windows flooding the space with clear, even light. I stepped inside, imagining my easel, my paints, the sea lavender I'd sketched last night coming to life here. "This was the lighthouse keeper's office," Thaddeus said, running a hand along the stone wall. "The last owner, an architect, turned it into a studio. Perfect for an artist like you." I turned to him, surprised. "You know my work," he chuckled. "Who doesn't?" "Your Wildflowers of the Pacific Coast is on my coffee table. My wife won't stop talking about your dune grass illustrations." Warmth spread through me, a reminder that my art had touched lives, even if Claire dismissed it as clutter. How much, I asked, my voice steady despite the butterflies in my stomach. 3.2 million, Thaddeus said, watching me closely. "It's a steal for the location, private beach, historic status, tax benefits, but there's interest from a buyer in Portland, so you'd need to move fast. 3.2 million. A number that would have made me laugh a month ago. Now, it was less than half my winnings. A tangible step toward freedom. "I'll think about it," I said, though my heart was already saying yes. Back home. The tension was thicker than the fog. Claire was in the kitchen, flipping through a catalogue of modern furniture, her laptop open to a real estate site. "Marianne," she said without looking up. "Where were you?" "We were worried." I set my purse down, ignoring the jab. "Out," I said simply, pouring myself a glass of water. She closed the catalogue, her eyes sharp. "You've been acting strange lately, sneaking off, not answering questions. James is concerned." James. My chest ached at his name. I hadn't heard from him in days, not since I'd left a voicemail asking him to call. "If James is concerned," I said, "he can tell me himself." Claire's smile was razor thin. "He's busy, you know that. Westview's board is breathing down my neck, and Colin's dealing with creditors. We don't need extra stress." I met her gaze, my voice calm but firm. "Then maybe you should focus on your own problems instead of inventing ones for me." Her eyes flashed, but before she could respond, Colin appeared, his phone in hand. "Marianne, we found a brochure for Coastal Haven in your mail," he said, holding it up like evidence. "Thought you might want to take a look. They've got a spot opening soon." I stared at the brochure, my blood boiling. I hadn't requested it. They'd ordered it, probably weeks ago. Building their case. "I'm not interested," I said, snatching it from his hand. "And I'd appreciate it if you stopped going through my mail." Colin's jaw tightened, but Claire stepped in, her voice syrupy. "We're just trying to help. This house is too much for you. The taxes alone, I've paid the taxes for 35 years. I cut in, I think I can handle them." Claire exchanged a look with Colin, a silent signal that set my nerves on edge. "Fine," she said, standing. But don't come crying to us when it all falls apart. I watched them leave the kitchen, their footsteps heavy on the stairs. My hand shook as I crumpled the brochure, but my resolve grew stronger. They weren't just after my house. They were after my autonomy, my dignity. I pulled out my phone and texted Valencia. They're escalating. Found a coastal haven brochure they ordered. What's next? Her reply was immediate. Document it. Take photos. I'm drafting the eviction notice. Stay sharp. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house creaked around me, each sound a reminder of the life I'd built and the threat to it. I slipped into the attic, where Colin had stashed my canvases. The air was musty, the space cluttered with boxes of Claire's designer clothes and Colin's old files. I found my paintings leaning against a wall, their edges curling from neglect. I ran my fingers over a watercolor of sea oats, remembering the summer I'd painted it. James playing nearby with his toy boats. But something was wrong. I counted the canvases 20, maybe 25. There should have been over 40. My heart sank. I searched the attic, moving boxes, checking corners, but they were gone. Claire's words from weeks ago echoed, "It's just clutter." Had they thrown them out, sold them? The thought was a knife in my chest. I sat on the floor, tears stinging my eyes. Those paintings were more than art. They were my voice, my legacy, the hours I'd stolen from sleep to create something lasting. I pulled out my phone and texted Valencia again. "Some of my paintings are missing. I think they took them." Her response came quickly. "That's theft. I'll get an investigator on it. Don't confront them yet. We need proof." I nodded to myself, wiping my tears. Claire and Colin thought they could erase me, piece by piece, but they'd underestimated me. I wasn't just a widow with a pension. I was Marianne Caldwell, artist, mother, survivor, and I was done playing their game. The next day, I met Thaddeus at North Cove Cottage again, needing to see it one more time. The studio's light was even more breathtaking in the afternoon, the sea sparkling beyond the windows. "I want it," I told him, my voice firm. "Draw up the offer." His eyes lit up. "You won't regret this." "Marianne, I'll get the paperwork started. Can you close in 3 weeks?" 3 weeks, the same timeline as the eviction notice Valencia was preparing. It felt like fate. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." As I drove back to Harborview, the lighthouse beams swept across the horizon, a steady pulse in the gathering dusk. I thought of the trust, the cottage, the paintings I'd fight to reclaim. Claire and Colin thought they had the upper hand, but they didn't know about the $12 million or the woman I was becoming. I stopped at the corner coffee shop, ordered a latte, and pulled out my sketchbook. I drew the lighthouse, its light cutting through the fog, a beacon for ships lost at sea, and for me, lost too long in a storm I hadn't chosen. But I was finding my way now. One careful step at a time. The Seaside Grand Hotel smelled of polished wood and fresh lilies, its lobby a haven of soft light and quiet elegance. I stood in my suite, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Harborview's harbor, where fishing boats bobbed under a late afternoon sky. At 62. I never thought I'd be living in a place like this, with a king-size bed and a marble bathroom bigger than my old kitchen. But here I was, 2 suitcases unpacked, my sketchbook open on the desk, and $8 million safely tucked into a trust. The lottery win had given me freedom, but it was the choices I was making now careful, deliberate, that were giving me back myself. I'd left my Victorian house a week ago, after Claire and Colin's coastal haven brochure pushed me over the edge. Valencia, my lawyer, had served them an eviction notice, giving them 60 days to leave, but I couldn't stay under the same roof, not with my paintings missing, not with their whispers about my forgetfulness growing bolder. The hotel was my sanctuary, a place to plan, to breathe, to rediscover the artist I'd buried under years of motherhood and sacrifice. Today, I had a meeting at Harrington Gallery with Eleanor, the curator who'd recognized my work. She'd invited me to discuss a potential exhibit, a chance to showcase my botanical illustrations alongside historic artifacts. As I slipped into a navy dress, simple but sharp, bought at Alicia's boutique, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Silver hair, green eyes, lines etched by time and care. I looked like Marianne Caldwell, but stronger, like a dune grass that had weathered storms and still stood tall. The gallery was a world of hushed reverence, its walls lined with paintings and its air tinged with the scent of oil and canvas. Eleanor greeted me at the entrance, her tailored blazer and pearl earrings giving her a quiet authority. "Marianne, you're glowing," she said, her smile genuine. "Come, I've got someone you need to meet." She led me to a small exhibit room where Dr. Evelyn Voss, the Maritime Museum's director, was examining a display case of faded maps. Evelyn, a woman in her 60s with a sharp bob and a warm handshake, turned as we approached. "Marianne Caldwell," she said, her eyes lighting up. "Your wildflowers of the Pacific coast is a treasure. Eleanor tells me you're interested in a collaboration." I blushed, unaccustomed to praise. "I'm honored," I said. What kind of collaboration? Evelyn gestured to the maps, Captain Winthrop's nautical charts, their ink tracing the Oregon coast in meticulous detail. "These charts aren't just navigational," she said. "Winthrop was a botanist, too, noting coastal plants we still study today. We're planning an exhibit to show how the ecosystem has evolved. Your illustrations could bring his work to life, a modern lens on the same species." My heart raced. This wasn't just an exhibit. It was a chance to reconnect with my art, to matter in a way I hadn't since James was small. "I'd love to," I said, my voice steady. "What's the scope?" We spent an hour hashing out details, 20 new paintings, a 6-month timeline, a public unveiling with educational panels. Evelyn's passion for history and Eleanor's eye for art made me feel like I belonged, like my work belonged. As we wrapped up, Evelyn handed me a folder. "This is our draft proposal," she said. "And Marianne, we're offering $85,000 for the commission. Your work deserves it. $85,000. More than I'd earned from art in a decade." I nodded, too stunned to speak, and left the meeting with a fire in my chest. For years, Claire had called my paintings clutter. Now they were the heart of a museum exhibit. That afternoon, I met Thaddeus Carter at North Cove Cottage to sign the purchase agreement. The stone house felt like home already, its glass-walled living room catching the sea's endless shimmer. The studio was the clincher north-facing windows, built-in shelves, a space where I could paint without Claire's interruptions or Colin's disdain. "Everything's in order," Thaddeus said, sliding the papers across a wooden table. $3.2 million, closing in 3 weeks. "You sure about this, Marianne?" I signed my name, the pen steady in my hand. "I've never been surer," I said. "This place is where I start again." He smiled, handing me a key. The architect who owned it was an artist. Too, he'd be thrilled to know you're taking it over. I walked to the studio alone, standing in the empty space. Light poured through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like fireflies. I imagined my easel here, my paints lined up, the sea lavender I'd sketched coming to life. For the first time in years, I felt like the girl who'd dreamed of museum walls, not the widow who'd settled for survival. Back at the hotel, reality hit hard. Valencia called as I was brewing chamomile tea, her voice grim. "Marianne, my investigator found something." Claire and Colin tried to access your bank account yesterday. They presented a power of attorney document, claiming you're incapacitated. My heart stopped. Incapacitated. How I never signed anything. The documents are fake, Valencia said. The notary seals from someone who lost their license years ago. And the medical assessment signed by a Dr. Harmon, a friend of Claire's from Westview's board. The bank flagged it and contacted me. Your accounts are secure, but this is serious. I sank onto the bed, the tea forgotten. What were they after? Your money, Valencia said bluntly. They don't know about the lottery yet, but they're fishing, probably hoping to get control before you make any big moves. I'm filing for a restraining order, citing attempted financial exploitation, but we need to talk about those missing paintings. The paintings. My stomach churned. Did your investigator find them? Not yet, she said, but we traced a lead to a storage unit in Astoria. Colin rented it last month. If they're there, we'll get them back. If not, it's theft. Marianne, we can add it to the complaint. I closed my eyes, picturing my watercolors, sea oats, lupines, June grass sold off like yard sale trinkets. I want them back, Val, I said. They're not just paintings. They're me, I know. She said softly, we'll fight for them. In the meantime, keep documenting everything and stay safe. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching the harbor lights flicker, the lighthouse beams sweeping through the darkness. Claire's betrayal wasn't just about money or the house. It was about erasing me, reducing my life to a footnote in her ambition. I thought of James. His silence a wound I couldn't heal. Had Claire shown him the eviction notice? Did he believe her lies about my incapacity? My phone buzzed, startling me. A voicemail from James. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the play button. When I finally pressed it, his voice was low, strained. Mom, it's me. I don't know what's going on. Claire says you're pushing us out, that you're not yourself. I just want to talk. Call me, okay? I replayed it, tears welling. He sounded like the boy who'd run to me with scraped knees, not the man who'd let his wife take over my home. I wanted to call, to tell him everything, the lottery, the paintings, the truth about Claire. But Valencia's warning echoed, stay sharp. If I told James now, Claire would know, and their desperation would only grow. I texted instead, James, I love you, I'm fine, but we need to talk in person, soon. I hit send, hoping he'd understand, hoping he'd see me as his mother, not Claire's enemy. The next morning, I met Eleanor at a coffee shop on Harborview's main street. Its windows steamed from the espresso machine. She slid a latte across the table, her eyes bright. Marianne, the museum's buzzing about your exhibit. We're planning a reception to announce it invitation only. Cultural elite. The works. I sipped the latte, its warmth grounding me. A reception, that's big, it's huge, she said, leaning in. Your work's been under the radar too long. This is your moment. Plus, it'll show the world you're not just a local artist, you're a force. I smiled, the idea sparking something in me. A public event would cement my place, make it harder for Claire to spin her lies. Count me in, I said. When next Thursday, Eleanor said, jotting notes, we'll invite museum patrons, collectors, even some folks from Astoria University. Dr. Voss is thrilled. As we planned, I felt a shift. For years, I'd shrunk myself to fit Claire's narrative, James's needs, the world's expectations. Now, I was stepping into the light, claiming space I'd long surrendered, but the ache for James lingered. I needed him to see this, to see me. That afternoon, I drove to the storage unit in Astoria, following a tip from Valencia's investigator. The facility was a maze of corrugated metal, its air damp and stale. Unit 217, rented under Colin's name, was locked with a cheap padlock. I'd brought a court order, secured by Valencia, and a locksmith stood ready. My heart pounded as he popped the lock, the door groaning open. Inside, I found boxes of Claire's old clothes, Colin's files, and stacked against the wall 10 of my paintings. I knelt, running my fingers over a watercolor of dune grass, its edges frayed but intact. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. Over 30 paintings were still missing. I called Valencia, my voice trembling. I found some, but not all. What now? We'll keep looking, she said. My investigator's tracking a lead to a dealer in Portland. If Colin sold them, we'll file charges. For now, take what you found to a safe deposit box. I loaded the paintings into my car, each one a piece of my soul reclaimed, but the loss of the others burned. I drove back to Harborview, the lighthouse beam guiding me through the dusk. Claire and Colin had taken more than canvas. They'd taken my trust, my peace, but they hadn't taken my fight. At the hotel, I set up a makeshift studio, propping one of the recovered paintings on the desk. I sketched a new sea lavender, its blooms vivid against the page. Each stroke was a promise to myself, to James, to the artist I'd always been. Claire could lie, Colin could steal, but they couldn't take this. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Got your message. Can we meet tomorrow? Just you and me. My heart leapt, but caution held me back. I typed tomorrow, 3 p.m., Harbour Bench. I needed to see him, to know if he was still my son or Claire's pawn. As I drifted to sleep, the lighthouse beam swept through my window, steady and sure. I was rebuilding my life, one careful step at a time. But the battle wasn't over, not until my paintings were home, not until James saw the truth. The harbour bench was cold beneath me, its wood weathered by years of salt and wind. I sat facing the Pacific, sketchbook in my lap, pencil tracing the curve of a sea oat against the horizon. Harborview's afternoon light was soft, the kind that made everything waves, gulls. Even my own thoughts seemed clearer. I'd come to meet James, my son, after weeks of silence, hoping for a bridge between us. But as I waited, my mind drifted to the reception at Harrington Gallery tonight, the event that would announce my exhibit with the Maritime Museum. It was more than a celebration. It was my stand, a declaration that I was no longer the woman Claire and Colin could dismiss. Yesterday's discovery of my stolen paintings in the Astoria storage unit had been a bittersweet victory. 10 canvases recovered, but over 30 still missing, likely sold by Colin to cover his debts. Valencia, my lawyer, was tracking a lead to a Portland dealer, but the loss gnawed at me. Those paintings were my heart, my hours of moonlight sketching, my proof that I'd been more than a mother, more than a widow. Tonight, I'd face Claire and Colin again, knowing what they'd done, but I wasn't afraid. I was ready. James arrived at 3, his familiar lanky frame cutting through the harbour's bustle. His dark hair was tousled, his eyes tired. But when he saw me, he managed a small smile. "Mom," he said, sitting beside me, "you look different." I closed my sketchbook, studying him. At 35, he was still my boy, but the weight of Claire's influence hung over him, different how I asked, keeping my tone light. He shrugged, looking out at the water. "I don't know. Stronger, maybe. Claire says you're not yourself, but you seem fine to me." Fine. The word stung, too small for the storm inside me. "James," I said, turning to face him, "I'm more than fine. I'm fighting for my life. Do you know what Claire and Colin have been doing?" His jaw tightened, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "Claire said you're pushing us out, that you're spending money you don't have. She showed me the eviction notice. Mom, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, the sea air steadying me. They want my house, James. They tried to push me into Coastal Haven, spread lies about my health, even took my paintings. Did Claire tell you about the storage unit, or the fake documents they used to access my bank account? His eyes widened, shock replacing defensiveness. What to know? She didn't. Paintings, Mom. What paintings? I told him everything, the missing canvases, the power of attorney fraud, the way they dismantled my life piece by piece. His face paled, his hands clenching. I didn't know, he said, his voice breaking. Claire said you were struggling, that we were helping. I trusted her. I reached for his hand, its warmth a reminder of the boy who'd brought me seashells. I know you did, I said softly, but you need to see her for who she is. She's not just hurting me. She's hurting you, too. He pulled his hand away, standing abruptly. I need to think, he said. I'll call you. Okay. I nodded, my heart aching as he walked away, his shoulders hunched against the wind. I wanted to run after him, to fix it all, but I knew he had to find his own truth. As the lighthouse beams swept across the harbour, I opened my sketchbook again, drawing a single gull soaring above the waves. Freedom, I thought, for both of us. The Harrington Gallery glowed like a beacon that evening, its chandeliers casting a warm halo over the crowd. I wore the emerald dress from EVA'S, its fabric catching the light as I moved through the room. My botanical illustrations lined the walls, their delicate blooms a stark contrast to the faded ink of Captain Winthrop's charts. Guests mingled museum patrons, local artists, professors from Astoria University, each one drawn to the story of a coast that had endured centuries of change. I felt a quiet pride, but also a nervous edge. Claire and Colin would be here. I could feel it. Dr. Evelyn Voss found me near a display of sea lavender, her smile radiant. Marianne, the response is incredible, she said, gesturing to the crowd. We've already had offers to fund the exhibit's educational programs. Your work's striking a chord. I blushed, unaccustomed to the spotlight. Thank you, Evelyn. It means more than I can say. She leaned in, her voice low. Eleanor warned me your daughter-in-law might show up. If there's trouble, we've got security on standby. I nodded, grateful for their support. I can handle Claire, I said, but I appreciate it. As Evelyn moved to greet a patron, I scanned the room, my eyes catching a flash of blonde hair near the entrance. Claire, in a too-tight navy dress, stood with Colin, their faces tense. They weren't here to celebrate. They were here to sabotage. I straightened, my resolve hardening. Let them try. Claire approached first, her smile a mask of false warmth. Marianne, she said, loud enough to draw eyes. What a lovely event. I had no idea you were so ambitious. I sipped my champagne, meeting her gaze. It's not ambition. Claire, it's who I am. I'm surprised you're here, given how little you think of my work. Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Oh, I think it's charming. But let's be honest, this sudden reinvention, it's a bit much for someone your age. Don't you think the jab was meant to wound? But I didn't flinch. Age has nothing to do with it, I said calmly. Art doesn't retire. Neither do I. Colin stepped forward, his voice smooth but edged. Marianne, we're worried about you. Spending money like this, moving out without a word, it's not rational. James is beside himself. The mention of James stung, but I saw through their game. Funny, I said. I spoke to James today. He seemed more concerned about your lies than my choices. Claire's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Eleanor appeared, her presence commanding. Marianne, the crowd's waiting for your remarks, she said, then turned to Claire. Ms. Hammond, I hope you're enjoying the exhibit. Marianne's work is quite the draw. Claire forced a smile, but her frustration was palpable. Of course, she said. We're just here to support. Eleanor guided me to the center of the room, where a microphone waited. The crowd quieted, their faces expectant. I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment settling over me. Thank you all for being here. I began, my voice steady. This exhibit is a love letter to Harborview's coast, its wildflowers, its resilience, its history. Captain Winthrop saw beauty in these plants 2 centuries ago, and I'm honored to continue that conversation through my art. The applause was warm, genuine, but Claire's voice cut through, sharp and deliberate. It's a nice story. Marianne, she called, stepping forward. But shouldn't you be focusing on family instead of chasing fame? James deserves better. The room stilled, eyes darting between us. I felt a flash of anger, but also clarity. This was her last stand, her attempt to shame me into silence. I met her gaze, my voice calm but firm. James deserves a mother who stands up for herself. I said, and a wife who tells the truth. You've tried to paint me as unstable, Claire, but these people see me for who I am, an artist, a survivor, a woman who won't be erased. Evelyn stepped forward, her tone icy. Ms. Hammond, this is an art event, not a family feud. If you can't respect that, I'll have security escort you out. Claire's face flushed, but Colin grabbed her arm, murmuring, let's go. They retreated, the crowd parting like the sea. Their exit a silent admission of defeat. I exhaled, the tension draining from my shoulders. The applause resumed, louder now. A wave of support that carried me through the rest of the night. Later, at the hotel, Valencia called with an update. We found the rest of your paintings, she said, her voice triumphant. Portland dealer had them, bought from Colin for pennies. Some are damaged, but most are salvageable. I'm arranging their return. Relief flooded me, but also sorrow. Damaged. I repeated, my voice catching. How bad, edges torn, a few water stains, she said. But they're yours again. And Marianne. We've got enough to charge Colin with theft. Claire, too, if she knew. I sat on the bed, the harbour lights twinkling outside. No charges. I said, not yet. I told Claire I'd drop the fraud complaint if she returned the paintings. Let's see if she keeps her word. Valencia sighed. You're too kind. But okay, I'll hold off for now. After we hung up, I pulled out a recovered canvas, a watercolour of lupines, its colours still vibrant despite a torn corner. I traced the petals, remembering the summer I'd painted it, James napping nearby. Claire's betrayal had scarred my work, but it hadn't destroyed it. Like me, it was battered but whole. The next morning, James knocked on my hotel door, his face pale but determined. Mom, he said, stepping inside. I talked to Claire. She admitted everything, the paintings, the bank documents. I didn't know, I swear. I gestured to the couch, my heart pounding. Sit, James. Tell me. He sank down, his hands twisting. She said it was for us, to save us from debt. But it's not right. I told her she has to make it right. Or I'm done. I studied him, seeing the boy who'd trusted me, the man who was finally waking up. I'm proud of you, I said softly. But you need to decide who you want to be. I'll always love you, but I can't fight your battles. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I know, I'm sorry. Mom, for all of it. I hugged him, his warmth a balm for the wounds Claire had left. We'll figure it out, I whispered, one step at a time. As James left, I stood by the window, the lighthouse beams sweeping through the dawn. Tonight's victory at the gallery wasn't just about Claire's defeat. It was about claiming my place, my voice, the exhibit, the cottage, the paintings, they were mine again. proof that I could rebuild, even after betrayal. But James's apology was the real triumph, a sign that love, though bruised, could endure. The morning I moved into North Cove Cottage, the Oregon sky was a watercolor wash of blues and golds, the kind of light that made you believe in new beginnings. I stood in the driveway, my boots sinking into the gravel, watching movers carry my easel into the stone-walled studio. The cottage was everything I'd dreamed: rugged stone meeting sleek glass, a garden tumbling toward a private cove, the lighthouse just a heartbeat away. At 62, I was starting over, not with fear, but with a quiet joy I hadn't felt since I was a girl sketching wildflowers by the sea. The past month had been a storm: Claire's betrayal, Colin's theft, the fight to reclaim my paintings and my place in the world. But standing here, with the salt air kissing my skin, I felt the wounds beginning to heal. The Maritime Museum exhibit was underway. My paintings were mostly recovered, and James was reaching out, a fragile bridge between us. I wasn't whole yet, but I was getting there, one careful brushstroke at a time. The studio was my first stop. Its north-facing windows caught the morning light, turning the room into a cathedral of clarity. I set up my easel, arranging paints and brushes on the built-in shelves, each motion a ritual of reclamation. The 10 recovered paintings from Astoria leaned against the wall, their edges frayed but their colors alive. Valencia's investigator had tracked down 20 more in Portland, bought by a dealer who hadn't known they were stolen. 5 were still missing, their absence a dull ache, but I refused to let it define me. I'd paint new ones, better ones, for the exhibit and for myself. I opened my sketchbook, flipping to a half-finished drawing of sea lavender, its purple blooms delicate against a stormy sky. I'd started it the night I left my old house, a promise to the artist I'd buried. Now, I added a lighthouse in the background, its beam cutting through the clouds. It was more than art. It was my story surviving the dark, finding my way home. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Evelyn Voss Marianne. The exhibit layout's coming together. Can you meet tomorrow to review? Patrons are raving about your sketches. I smiled, typing back tomorrow's perfect. Thank you. Evelyn. The exhibit, set to open in 3 months, was my anchor, a chance to show Harborview and myself that my art mattered. $85,000 for the commission was generous, but the real payment was the respect, the purpose, the voice I'd regained. That afternoon, I walked the cottage's garden, its paths winding through native plants, dune grass, lupins, sea oats. They were the same species I'd painted for decades, their resilience a mirror of my own. I knelt by a patch of wild roses, their petals soft against my fingers, and remembered a summer long ago when James, barely 5, had picked one for me. For you. Mama, he'd said, his grin brighter than the sun. I'd pressed it in a book, a keepsake of a time when love was simple. Now love was complicated. James's visit to the hotel yesterday had been a start. His apology a crack in the wall Claire had built between us. But he was still married to her, still navigating the fallout of her lies. Valencia had called this morning with news. Claire had returned the last 5 paintings, found in a Seattle gallery, and promised to cooperate to avoid charges. She's scared, Valencia said. Colin's facing creditors, and Westview's board is questioning her ethics. She's got no leverage left. I'd agreed to drop the fraud complaint, not out of pity, but because I wanted peace. Claire's actions had consequences. Her reputation was fraying. Her marriage strained, but I didn't need to add to them. I'd reclaimed my paintings, my home, my life. That was enough. The next day, I met Evelyn at the Maritime Museum, a sleek building on Harborview's waterfront, its glass walls reflecting the sea. Inside, the exhibit space was taking shape, with Winthrop's charts displayed alongside mock-ups of my illustrations. Evelyn walked me through the layout, her enthusiasm infectious. "Your paintings will go here," she said, pointing to a central wall. "Visitors will see the past and present side by side, Winthrop's notes. Your art, a story of how the coast endures." I ran my fingers along a chart. Its ink faded but precise. "It's humbling," I said, "to think my work's part of this legacy." Evelyn smiled, her eyes warm. "It's not just the work, Marianne. It's you, your resilience, your vision. People are talking collectors, professors, even the Herald. You're a local hero." I laughed, shaking my head. "Hero's a stretch. I'm just me." "Exactly," she said, "and that's enough." As we finalized details, a woman approached Professor Lila Montgomery from Astoria University's Environmental Sciences Department. "Marianne," she said, her handshake firm, "your illustrations are in our field guides. We'd love to develop curriculum materials for the exhibit. Maybe even have you lecture." Interested, the offer stunned me. Teaching, sharing my knowledge with students, it was a dream I'd shelved years ago. I'd be honored. I said, my voice catching, "Let's set up a time to talk." That evening, I returned to the cottage, the lighthouse beams sweeping through the twilight. I brewed chamomile tea, its scent mingling with the salt air, and sat in the glass-winged living room, watching the stars emerge. The Herald had published a front-page story about the exhibit, calling me Harborview's hidden gem. I'd read it at the coffee shop, blushing as the barista slipped me a free scone. "You're famous now," Marianne she'd teased. Fame wasn't what I wanted. I wanted the quiet of the cottage, the hum of creativity, the knowledge that I'd fought for myself and won. But the victory was bittersweet. James was still out there, wrestling with his choices, and Claire's shadow lingered, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. My phone buzzed, a text from Thaddeus Carter Marianne. "The cottage is officially yours." "Welcome home." I smiled, typing back, "Thank you, Thaddeus. It already feels like home." A week later, the exhibit's opening night arrived. The museum was alive with light and laughter, its halls filled with patrons, artists, and locals. My paintings hung proudly, their colors vibrant against the chart's faded ink. I wore a teal dress, its hue echoing the sea. My silver hair swept into a loose bun. As I mingled, accepting compliments and answering questions, I felt a sense of belonging I'd never known. Evelyn introduced me to a group of donors, her voice proud. "Marianne's work bridges centuries," she said. "Her art reminds us that beauty endures, even through change." A man in a tweed jacket, a collector from Portland, raised his glass. "To Marianne," he said, "a true artist." The crowd toasted, and I smiled. My heart full, but my eyes kept drifting to the entrance, hoping for James. He'd promised to come, but as the night wore on, I began to doubt. Claire wouldn't be here, she'd texted an apology, claiming a work conflict, but James was different. I needed him to see this, to see me. As the event wound down, I stepped outside. The night air cool against my skin. The lighthouse beams swept across the harbor, a steady pulse in the dark. I was about to turn back when I heard footsteps. "Mom." I turned, my breath catching. James stood there, his coat damp from the mist, a small package in his hands. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said. I needed to think." I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." He held out the package, his eyes soft. "This is for you. I found it in Claire's things. I think you'll want it." I unwrapped it, my hands trembling. Inside was a pressed wild rose, framed in simple wood, and a child's drawing a crude sketch of a lighthouse. Signed, James, age 5. My throat tightened. "You kept this?" I whispered. "I never forgot," he said, his voice breaking. "Mom, I'm so sorry for everything. Claire's moving out, getting help. I should have seen it sooner." I hugged him, tears falling. "You're here now," I repeated. "We'll figure it out. Together." We stood there, the lighthouse beam washing over us, a promise of healing, of hope. The next morning, I sat in my studio, painting a new sea lavender for the exhibit. The light was perfect, the sea a constant muse beyond the windows. James had stayed late last night, talking, laughing, rebuilding what we'd lost. Claire was facing her own reckoning. Westview had suspended her. And Colin was negotiating with creditors, but I felt no urge to gloat. I'd chosen forgiveness, not for them, but for me. My phone buzzed with an email from Lila Montgomery, confirming my guest lecture at Astoria University. Another from Evelyn, reporting that the exhibit had drawn record crowds. I smiled, setting the phone aside. The world was opening to me. But this moment, brush in hand, sea in view, was enough. I thought of the girl I'd been, sketching by moonlight, dreaming of a life beyond the library's walls. I thought of the mother who'd raised James, the widow who'd survived loss, the woman who'd fought for her voice. They were all me, woven together like the wildflowers in my garden, resilient and beautiful. If I'd learned anything at 62, it was this: you're never too old to start again. Love yourself, fight for your dreams, let your own lighthouse guide you home. I dipped my brush in paint, the canvas waiting, and began. Thank you for joining Marianne's journey, from heartbreak to healing. If her story touched you, hit that subscribe button to discover more tales of courage and renewal. What's your lighthouse? The thing that guides you through the dark. Share it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And it might light the way for someone else. Stay tuned for more, because every ending is a new beginning. Well, my sweet friends, wasn't Marianne's journey a lighthouse in the storm? It's Eva, your 65-year-old friend from Eufaula, Alabama, where the river still sings of hope. I stepped into Marianne Caldwell's shoes to share her tale of heartbreak and triumph. And I know you'll felt every beat of her brave heart, because you've walked those roads too. Her story reminds us that no matter our age, we can rise, love ourselves, and shine. If Marianne's courage lit a spark in you, hit that subscribe button to keep our stories glowing. What's your lighthouse? The thing that guides you through the dark. Drop it in the comments. Your words might lift someone else. Grab your tea, wrap up in that cozy quilt, and join us next time for another tale that feels like a warm hug from home. Until then, keep shining, darlings.